Donald Tsang loses appeal bid, but jail term cut short. Former South Korean leader Park Geun-hye gets 8 more years in jail. And incredulity as Trump invites Putin to visit him at the White House after a highly criticized summit in Helsinki.
Good evening. Former Chief Executive Donald Tsang today lost an appeal over his conviction of misconduct in public office. Still, his sentence was reduced from 20 to 12 months. But instead of going straight back to jail, he ended up in hospital. Christy Leung has the details.
Shortly after being remanded in custody, the city's former leader Donald Tsang told prison staff he felt unwell. The 73-year-old was then taken to Queen Mary Hospital. His wife Selina Tsang and other family members visited him there. It happened shortly after a panel of 3 judges unanimously rejected Tsang's appeal over his conviction of misconduct in public office. The conviction was for failing to disclose to the Executive Council a property deal with businessman Bill Wong between 2010 and 2012, while a media company of which Wong was a major shareholder was applying for a digital radio license. A judge agreed with the jury there was a deliberate concealment of the conflict of interest between the pair. The court believed Tsang's actions cut against such ethos of the civil service and breached the trust of society. But given his good character and past contribution to Hong Kong, Donald Tsang's jail term was reduced from 20 months to 12 months. The former leader's legal costs also went down to $1 million, a fifth of the original fee, as the judges thought the retiree was unlikely to start another career. Tsang's lawyer tried to apply for bail, suggesting they may take the case to the Court of Final Appeal. His request for bail was rejected and was urged to study the 96-page judgment first. Mrs. Tsang spoke of her disappointment and heartache, but didn't reveal the next step. Last February, Tsang was sentenced to 20 months in jail upon conviction.
While in jail last year, Tsang complained of breathing problems. He then spent at least 10 days in custody in a public hospital.
He was later released on bail after 63 days in prison, pending today's appeal. Christy Leung, TVB News.
To the latest on the lead water scare at Kwai Choi Estate, the government insists the water there is safe to use, but the Democratic Party, which first alerted people to the scare, is not satisfied with the government's response. Caleb Bloom reports.
It's a no for Kwai Choi Estate residents who asked for temporary housing because of the water scare. The government insists that the estate's water supply is within safety standards. Subsidized housing applicants can still be assigned flats at the estate.
Well, we have the balance between the need for accommodation and the concern on water safety. So far, we will continue to allocate flats for those who are in need of accommodation. By the time when they are given the allocation, they do have a choice to refuse it and wait for another allocation.
The scare came after the Democratic Party found some water samples from 8 of the estate's flats containing excessive levels of lead. One sample was 10 times the safety level specified in the World Health Organization's guidelines. But Frank Chen said all samples tested by the government since February this year fall within the standards of Hong Kong and the WHO. This includes samples taken from the 2 problematic flats where the Democratic Party also took samples from. Chen also noted that the tenants of the 2 units have modified their plumbing and advised them to flush their pipes thoroughly. The Democratic Party was not satisfied with the response. The party's Helena Wong said the government merely testing samples from 2 flats is not enough to reassure residents. The party will take 5 to 10 samples today for further testing, including from flats with no plumbing modifications. It also urged the government to test 24 more samples. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
The government's recent proposed ban on a political party for national security reasons has sparked a heated debate and protests around town. Sharon Tang has more.
A big no from the Civil Human Rights Front. It says the government is suppressing freedom of association even before Basic Law Article 23 on national security is enacted locally.
We are afraid that would be another version of Article 23. According to Article 23, any kinds of the try to threaten the national security or trying to have any disobedience of the country would have the risk to be sentenced.
The group will stage a march in Wan Chai tomorrow to protest against the security chief's recent proposal. Secretary for Security John Lee said on Tuesday he may outlaw the Hong Kong National Party, which authorities see as a threat to public safety. He then gave 21 days for the party to justify why it shouldn't be banned. It's a reasonable move according to a local member of the National People's Congress Standing Committee. Tam Yu Chung alleged the party had colluded with Taiwanese separatists and advocated Hong Kong independence in schools. These are intolerable actions the government should stop as soon as possible, he said. Meanwhile, a pro-government group with more than 10 members petitioned outside the central government offices this morning to show support towards the government's actions. Protect our country, banish those who divide us, they shouted. Later in the day, the group also rallied outside the British Consulate General, saying it has intervened in China's internal politics by being highly concerned about the ban. Sharon Tang, TVB News.
Turning overseas, a South Korean court has sentenced former President Park Geun-hye to 8 more years in prison after finding her guilty of abusing state funds and violating election laws. The Seoul Central District Court found her guilty of unlawfully receiving more than $2.6 million from chiefs of the National Intelligence Service during her presidency. Park now faces the prospect of more than 3 decades behind bars. She's already serving 24 years over a massive corruption scandal that led to her removal from office last year. Park was also found guilty of interfering in the ruling party's selection of candidates for a parliamentary election. The 66-year-old did not appear in court for today's sentencing.
Germany's DIHK, Chamber of Commerce, estimates that a proposed U.S. tariff of 25% on imported cars would slash about $7 billion off German economic output. And an American auto analyst says the tariff could have a similar effect in the United States.
For domestic automakers like General Motors, Ford, and Fiat Chrysler, they're opposed to this because it will raise the cost of some of their parts, as well as the vehicles that they build outside of the United States that they import. If the tariffs stay in place for an extended period of time, that could lead to some loss of economic growth here in the U.S. because of prices going up. Jobs will be lost both at U.S. automakers and suppliers and dealers.
He says that because the American auto industry is so large, it will have a cascading effect on other industries. The U.S. Commerce Department is holding a hearing on the tariff proposal today. It will decide whether to label imported vehicles and auto parts a threat to America's national security and whether to recommend the tariff to the president.
A boat tour in the U.S. state of Missouri ended in tragedy when it capsized and sank, killing 11 people, including children. It's called the Ride the Ducks boat tour because it's conducted on an amphibious truck. It's called the Duck because it easily maneuvers in or out of water. What was supposed to be a fun land and lake excursion of Table Rock Lake in Branson turned deadly when stormy weather suddenly struck. One witness watched the horror unfold while touring from a different boat that was able to make it back to shore safely.
So I was in the showboat, and I didn't see them fall over, but we all knew that one of them rolled or whatever it may be. I saw two people would be way off in the distance, so we were at the front of the boat and they were way off in the distance. I believe they may be actual workers that jumped in after others trying to save them.
Still ahead in tonight's news. Fate of hundreds of Greyhound race dogs up in the air in Macau. Heavy rain hits southern Taiwan. And Mark Zuckerberg courts controversy over how he'd handle Holocaust deniers on Facebook.
恒生信用卡夏日激賞，賞你高達1100蚊 cash dollars， 俾你喺全港商戶進行購物同消費，同至愛好友一齊分享更多夏日笑容。立即登記大賺高達1100蚊 cash dollars， 同埋精選商戶折扣優惠，日日最想點子獎賞，借定唔借，玩得到先好借。
Welcome back to TVB News. Macau's only dog racing club will close tomorrow, but where will hundreds of greyhounds go? Even the operator can't say for sure. Elmi Lung reports.
This is Macau's Canidrome Club, China's only dog racing track. It will close tomorrow when its lease expires. Hundreds of greyhounds bred for racing are now in limbo. These two, adopted by a Hong Kong family, are being picked up by Macau-based animal rights group Anima. But 400 other dogs aren't going very far as they're still waiting for a new home.
They cannot take them to home because for the long procedure, we hope Anima can help all the greyhounds for the adoption to oversee also.
The group's been vocal on Yet Yun, the company that operates the club. So too has the Macau government. Last night it condemned Yet Yun for failing to provide a responsible solution for the dogs, despite knowing it had to vacate the premises more than 2 years ago. Yet Yun's executive director Angela Leung planned to hold a press conference this afternoon to give details on how they will handle the dogs, but later changed her mind.
We have requested the government to keep the dog here. Do you have an agreement with our government? No. We are waiting for the decision.
If in the end all dogs are abandoned, then local authorities will work with Anima and send 300 volunteers to look after the animals. Elmi Long, TVB News.
Chief Executive Carrie Lam hopes to forge even closer ties with Shenzhen when the high-speed rail link opens in September. That's what she told the Shenzhen mayor as they met this morning. The mayor hopes the Greater Bay Area project will bring the two cities closer. Principal officials also made the trip across the border to learn about robots and innovation.
In Taiwan, more than 4,000 households were left without electricity as heavy rains lashed Kaohsiung. Its international airport was also closed temporarily last night after a runway was damaged. With conditions like this, dozens of flights were delayed. Even on the ground, roads turned into streams. Water levels almost reached knee-high for this man, as parts of the city recorded close to 100 millimeters of rainfall in an hour. More rain is expected in the coming days.
Locally again, the government told lawmakers that a 5-year plan to boost Hong Kong football is failing to meet its goals. During LegCo's panel on Home Affairs meeting, the government reported on the Hong Kong Football Association's 5-year strategic plan. Under that plan, the government will earmark a maximum of $25 million to the association starting in 2015 for 5 years. But a midterm review showed the HKFA failed to meet some of its goals. This includes lifting the world rankings of representative teams and increasing attendance numbers of people watching Hong Kong Premier League matches.
Overseas again, Facebook says it will start removing misinformation that could lead to violence. This comes in the wake of CEO Mark Zuckerberg's awkward attempt to explain where Facebook draws the line on people who use the platform to deny the Holocaust. Alan Buckner reports.
Facebook, with 2.2 billion users, disallows things such as nudity, the selling of guns, credible threats of violence, and direct attacks on people's race or sexual orientation. But in an interview Wednesday, Mark Zuckerberg, who is Jewish, said that as long as they're not calling for harm or violence, posts denying the Nazi extermination of 6 million Jews would not necessarily be removed.
Right? I find that deeply offensive. But at the end of the day, I don't believe that our platform should take that down, because I think that there are things that different people get wrong. I don't think that they're intentionally getting it wrong, but I think that
in the case of the Holocaust deniers, they might be. But go ahead.
It's hard to impugn intent and to understand the intent.
Hours after the interview, however, Facebook said misinformation that could lead to bloodshed would be removed.
Holocaust deniers do have an agenda, and it is not a positive agenda. It speaks to that underlying anti-Semitism and hatred and bigotry.
Fake news isn't banned on Facebook, but the company does have algorithms and third-party fact-checking. It might label disputed stories as such and direct you to related content that might change your mind.
Facebook and other social media companies have an opportunity and, quite frankly, an obligation now to really wrap their minds around how media is being used. So I think it takes the smartest minds in the world to be thinking about how to balance the rights of an individual with the needs of our democracy.
Facebook says it doesn't want to become the arbiter of truth and instead lets users decide for themselves. Alan Booknia, TVB News.
And that's our news. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks for joining us.